Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and joining me today to end the Clone Wars is my very good friend Andrew, who you may also know as Greenshield 95. Andrew, welcome back.
Glad to be back, Satsunami.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you back, and I'm glad you weren't scared off at the last episode.
I had a lot of fun last time, and I'm looking forward to continue talking about a show that I really like, and I've since rewatched since our last podcast episode, so I'm pretty excited to talk about part 2.
Yeah, because the big news, of course, today we're talking about the very popular show. I was going to say iconic, which it is iconic, isn't it?
A cult classic.
Yeah, cult classic. I think it's kind of... So today, of course, we're going to be talking about the second part of the series Clone Wars 2003, of course, which was created by Genndy Tartakovsky. We are basically going to be talking about the second part, which I have to say, would you say part 2 is more memorable than part 1?
When I was younger, I mean, the two parts kind of blended together. I think both seasons have incredibly memorable sections. I would disagree. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily more memorable. I'd say both are very very interesting and both have very distinct parts, despite the fact that one kind of leads into the other.
I think probably the biggest difference is one of them is... So part 1 is more episodic. Like, there is like a story going on in the background, but there's a lot of like kind of side stories going on at the same time. Like, as we said last week, we had Mace Windu going off to fight the giant hole punch. We had 2 Jedi creating their own lightsabers. You know, there was all that kind of side stuff. Whereas now it seemed as if they were just making one kind of mini movie, really, isn't it?
It did seem that way because, as you say, it was much more episodic in the first section. There was a lot of world building, a lot of kind of exploring sections of the Star Wars universe that we hadn't really covered previously. For example, you're saying about the lightsaber building and various aspects of the world. And then with part 2, we've got one kind of long story. It jumps from back and forward to different characters a little bit, but it's the same as part 1 where we were meeting dozens of different characters. This one mainly focuses on Anakin. Also some views towards the Jedi Council and various other characters. Like that.
And I have to admit, although this is at least half of the series is a very Anakin-centric Anakin-centric part of the series, he does not get any better, does he? Like, as a character, he's still stuck in episode 2 Anakin, where he's quite whiny, and he's, like, especially at the beginning when he's still a Padawan, and he's very much like, I don't like the council. They want me to eat my greens. And you're like, just...
There is an element of that where you see him meeting up with Padme, which is a very kind of awkwardly done scene. If I have any negatives of this series, it would be particularly this scene where Anakin is being followed by Padme, and then they reunite, and then for some reason 3PO arrives and then flashes them his body.
Yeah, with the
very
saxophone music. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it very like sexy 3PO, like stupid sexy 3PO.
Yeah, it is something that it's like, you know how people say it's the one thing I never knew I wanted? This is the opposite. It's the one thing I never knew was a thing, but now I know it exists. I don't want. I wanted to go back in the idea box.
I hate it.
Yeah. But I feel as if... I think the other reason that scene probably... I mean, other than the fact that why would they meet in like a weird alley, is the fact that this part just starts so strong. And again, I probably am going to fanboy about it, but I'll let you describe it, otherwise I'll be here for an hour talking about it.
So, as we left off in part 1, General Grievous had just overwhelmed a group of Jedi, both Padawans, Knights and Masters, and completely destroying them. And so that's how we left off in part 1. And part 2 starts with clone troopers getting prepared and flying in to assist them, flying low, destroying some droids as they go by, dropping some detonators, but they don't explode them just yet. Talk to each other briefly, tell the orders. They'll split off into their various kind of duties, run through, and then they kind of come out to the light, and you see that only one of the Jedi Masters is still fighting with Grievous. The others are down, and it looks like Grievous has the upper hand. They both stop. Grievous glances over, and after he glances over, the clone troopers just like release all fire at him, and he looks like he's genuinely like, uh-oh, and runs away, which is so interesting because at no point ever, I feel, do we feel like these kind of ground troopers are like a threat to the Sith, to the Separatists. And it's a bit like how you never feel like the robots, the droids, are a threat to the Jedi. That it doesn't merit running away or retreating due to the fire. They usually just jump over and slice them up, which is what happens later in the series. But you can see General Grievous is concerned here and realizes he's just lost the upper hand and has to retreat slightly. It's really well choreographed, really well orchestrated. You get to see the transport ship, which I know you're a big fan of.
Oh, I love it. For all you Star Wars fans out there, I think it's LAT or something like that. It's just basically like a flying transport ship for these clone troopers. But what they've done is they've like painted on like I suppose like a shark mouth on it, or space shark technically, with like the eyes like painted on, and it looks so cool. Like, I'm like very big into like tabletop painting as well, and I had like a similar ship that I actually painted using like that same design, because I was like, this is just so damn cool that I'm not gonna like pass up an opportunity to paint it on. It was,
yeah, I remember you posting that. It looks really cool. And what I think is most extraordinary is that ships like that, transport ships, the bulky ones, are never cool. Like if you think of like the sleek ships, particularly in Star Wars, you think of the X-Wings or TIE fighters or something like that. You don't think about a transport ship as having any possibility of being really cool or like something you'd want to have like a replica of. But they've managed to design something that just looks so interesting. And it's not just a transport ship. It has like the guns on it, and like it's like a threat in itself whilst transporting these elite troopers.
I mean, there is like a great moment in that scene where basically, as you said before, these ARC troopers. So, sorry, kind of backtracking to what you said before. One of the interesting things is the troopers and the droids, of course, as you said, are basically cannon fodder. Like, they're there to kind of be consumed in the action. But when you when you get introduced to the ARC troopers, you know stuff is about to go down. You know things are going to get really serious. So when they arrive, they put up a decent fight because they've got like so much firepower. But then Grievous manages to close the distance, and he takes out a couple of them, to which the captain just turns around and says, back up now. And all of a sudden, I love this scene so much because he says back up now, and all of a sudden their transport ship just bursts from just nowhere, isn't it? And then
and within seconds, I always thought this was remarkable because there's no possible way that it was ready to be moving forward, exploding, and going through within the second he says that. But like it just worked so cool.
Yeah,
and like there's this point where you're looking from the point of view of the ship at Grievous with the two lights pointed at him, and the ship and Grievous is kind of like staring at each other, and like just for like a long enough kind of lingering second that you're just like, oh, what's gonna happen? Yeah. Fires off all its like gunfire at Grievous, who starts running from it.
Because I do like the kind of subtext in that scene, which is something I never really thought of until like I rewatched it. But it's the fact that this ship, obviously it's got like the big eyes and the big mouth and things, almost as if it's like a giant predator. So like if you go back to like the finale of part 1, you see that Grievous was the predator. He was the one like stalking his prey and like picking them off one by one, basically toying with them, just so
it was like a xenomorph kind of.
Yeah, exactly. But now, and well, to kind of quote like a less favourable Star Wars film, there's always a bigger fish. But I mean, in this case it is. It's like this huge thing, this huge ship that has got him in the spotlights. And I see the kind of subtle movements if you look at him. Like he twists his like leg behind as if, like he's half thinking, how do I get out of this? And half, oh shit, I'm about to get blown up. Because, as you said, this thing just starts laying into him and starts firing, and then eventually manages to escape. Or no, he doesn't manage to escape, but he manages to get out of there just enough so that they can escape, even though Ki-Adi-Mundi, who is like one of the remaining Jedi who survived, wants to get out of there. Or sorry, wants to get him. But of course, the ARC troopers are just like, no, we have to get out of here, we are going to die. If if we stay, yeah. And when the ARC troopers are saying that, is like, yeah, you better listen, because this isn't going to go well for you either way.
And then to end that scene, the troopers hit the detonators they dropped previously, which creates like an explosive wall for them to like get past the surrounding droids that are waiting outside.
So cool.
Which just looks so awesome. Just the animation on the individual explosions going down the line as they fly through the smoke that's created. Really cool. And then the last thing you see from that scene is General Grievous standing out into the opening, staring at the ship flying away, and just tells them, "Run, Jedi, run." Yeah. And says, "You have only prolonged the inevitable."
Oh, man, back when Grievous was cool.
Oh, the line is just so good. And what you'd said in the previous episode, that in the later series, he becomes more of a mustache twirling villain, and is to be frightened of Grievous. In this series, how terrifying Grievous is, that even he defeats this entire Jedi group, and then he has the clone troopers come in to support them and to rescue them, but they're still frightened and trying to get away from him. And after all that, and after they've escaped, he still has the confidence to tell them that they've prolonged the inevitable, that he will get them, kind of thing. Which is, it's so badass, it's so cool, and very few villains especially in like cartoons, kind of matched that kind of confidence and just frightening energy.
Because this is the thing, and obviously we can definitely like fill up a Satsunami about like the 2008 series of like the Clone Wars, but I feel as if with
Which I'm sure we will.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much content there. But like with Grievous, I mean, I'm just going to talk about him now because he is definitely one of the highlights of this part. Like, especially at the end of the last part and then the introduction of this part. Because as I was saying in last week's episode, Grievous was designed to be like this Jedi killer. And I think, like, they did an amazing job of characterising him, because I don't think George Lucas really, like, explained what he wanted until after the series was made. And then, as you said, like, he went from being a Jedi killer to just being a coward that like ran away. And it's like, even in the 2008 series, like, oh god, like there's the episode where he gets taken down by Gungans, you know, like just just like really stuff you kind of look at him and you think, is this the same character between being this unstoppable Jedi hunter that makes people fear? I mean, even later on in the episode, I thought that was really clever. So sorry, before I go on, the series, or this part, is split up into two. So you've got, on the one side, you've got the invasion of Coruscant, and on the other side, you've got Anakin's, like, spiritual journey. Of course, not featuring Johnny Cash as a fox. Subtle Simpsons reference in there.
Among other little side stories that are there, but those are the two main ones.
Yeah, because, like...
What we get to explore is largely Anakin journey from Padawan to Jedi Knight. That we discover that this is where Anakin is knighted as a Jedi Knight. That he loses his stupid rat tail thing, and Yoda is off with a lightsaber. And like, I think everyone like sighed in relief when he got rid of that stupid hair.
I think that is probably like the reason Padawans tried to become knights, just to lose that braid.
Oh god. The rat tail just did not aid, and it also raised a lot of questions. A lot of don't have hair. They to represent that they were a Padawan.
They actually do address that in the 2008 one. I'm putting on my geek goggles here.
Oh yeah.
You know, Ahsoka doesn't have them, but she's got like a metal braid.
She's a metal braid. I guess I hadn't noticed.
Or it's something that hangs off one of her things on her head.
Her hair tentacles.
Tentacle things, yeah. I know they're called something, but for the life of me I can't remember. But yeah, she's got like a braid thing. So she's got like a substitute for it, which is probably a lot nicer than the rat tail. Like, you would probably be wishing you were like a Mon Calamari or something. Anything else.
I guess it'd be hard to say because we're not that species of alien. Maybe like for her, like, oh, this is so awkward. I hate having this kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
It's like I bet I mean, and again, they're not technically humans,
Oh yeah.
so
Hmm.
they may think the rat tail is cool. Seems hard to believe in any kind of species.
So what you're saying, they're like space weeps, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, so we see Anakin gets dubbed a Jedi Knight, and then there's a bit of a montage of what he accomplishes after becoming a Jedi Knight, where we see him defeating various like troops through space fights and Jedi on the ground. He's like frees a bunch of other Jedi from some like bubbles. And he take and there's this the scene that starts it. The montage though is a huge fleet of droids and a commander who's like got a weird like southern US accent, sort of claiming that it will take thousands of Jedi to take on his force of droids. And then like the droid says there are Jedi coming, and he says, "How many of them? 1,000?" And he says, "No, 80." Which I like. I like the jump down from 1,000 to
Yeah.
80. It amused me. And then he said, "No." And then he sort of took the binoculars and saw it was just two, and it was Obi-Wan and Anakin. Then all of a sudden they just get like a bunch of ships just fly in and start shooting, which I feel like was a big defensive error on their part that they wouldn't have seen that coming.
Yeah, I think like in terms of the 2003 series that it's the rule of cool that applies here.
Yeah,
It's definitely the rule of cool. It's like even if it makes no sense tactically, it doesn't matter as long as it looks cool. Then they'll just throw it in. Like there's so many moments like that, but we'll get
which
to that. but
I think that's part of the reason why Disney didn't mind
mhm,
throwing the series under the bus a little bit when it came to the what's deciding what is canon and what isn't. Then they
mhm.
decided this series is not canon because a lot of it is purely aesthetic over content. The show looks amazing. It's so cool. Some of the ideas are fantastic, but the actual layout of what's going on a lot of the time doesn't always work, especially in the grand scheme. There's some things that work fantastically well and do act as a very good bridge between the second and third prequel movies, but there's large elements of it that are lacking in terms of content.
Before the 2008 series came out, there was, this was considered to be the like definitive bridge between episodes 2 and 3. Like so much so that apparently in some places they actually showed this in the cinema before episode 3 aired. I can't remember if it was just the second
What,
part they showed.
all 2 hours of the show, or did they like
I think it must have
so?
just been the second part, but there was some cinemas that did show like one of the parts, if not all of it, as like a
Hmm,
kind of feature before the last part came out. Because I mean, remember that was like the last Star Wars content that we were getting for a while, from
that's true.
2006 to 2008 when the Clone Wars came out, but it didn't really pick up. There wasn't really a mainstream like movie until, of course, later on in about, was it 2010, 2011? I can't even remember. It wasn't
Well,
even
for the
20.
Force Awakens, that was
Yeah,
2015.
2015 even. Jesus, the time is just flying. Yeah, it was like that was really the definitive up until, as I said, up until 2008, that was like the definitive, I suppose, gospel where we could believe that General Grievous was a badass.
Well, as we mentioned previously, there was a 3 year gap between the second and third prequel movies,
Mhm.
and this came out in between that time. So it was the only content for Star Wars between those movies. And so
Yeah.
for those who were sort of hoping for the next one, and again, I was young at the time, so I don't know the general mood if people were excited for the next movie or if there was a bit of a reluctance given the
I've heard.
reception
Yeah.
of the second film.
Mhm. I'm just trying to remember myself. I think people were still excited for it, but I think in the perspective of a child, like I don't know how long term Star Wars fans felt about it. Whether or not they might have thought, oh, this is great, or this is, like I've heard it was kind of soured after the second one, or Attack of the Clones. It was kind of soured after that because that was probably, I think it still is one of the least well received films in the series.
I think it's the least well received. I think I do still think it has merits, which many
Hmm.
people won't,
Oh
but there
yeah.
are lines of it that are incredibly dull and poorly
Oh yeah,
written.
which is why I suppose when the Clone Wars came out, or sorry, Clone Wars came out, that yeah, it was just this breath of fresh air. It wasn't like about, and that's the thing though, because I don't want to pretend that Star Wars is like a thing for kids. Like, I think that argument's kind of null and void when you see decapitations, political talk. I mean, I think it's probably a series for like all the family, but I think at the time that is definitely like the action of it is definitely something that kids needed at the time to kind of get them a bit more interested. I mean, obviously you had the action scenes in the second film, but I mean, this is just, to coin a phrase, balls to the wall crazy. And I mean, I suppose this is quite a good time to like go on to like the major action piece. So as we said, there's like two separate stories. There's the Anakin stuff, which I'm gonna be honest, like, what did you prefer? See, when you like watched this part, what did you prefer? Did you prefer like the, after we get by the beginning stuff and then the montage, did you prefer the Anakin storyline or did you prefer the invasion of Coruscant?
I guess I always preferred the invasion of Coruscant because it typically had more interesting fights. Rewatching the part two just as I did today on Disney Plus. In fact, it's now on Disney Plus. Disney Plus, please sponsor.
Please,
Uh,
I need the money.
I did start to sort of appreciate the Anakin storyline a little bit more, partly with like a spiritual journey that Anakin takes, and he sees a vision of these like Aboriginal people where a dark kind of entity is attacking them. A warrior fends off the dark entity, and then the dark entity kind of like takes one of his hands, and his hand suddenly becomes very strong, and he's like, "Oh, well, okay, I have a very strong hand now." And he starts defending his people and defeating all these monsters, and everyone's loving him. But then the dark entity starts sort of taking over him a little bit, and he starts attacking the people he loves. And Anakin sort of seeing this and getting frightened, and then the dark entity kind of forms what can be interpreted as Darth Vader's mask. And I never fully understood the message it was going for when I was watching this when I was younger, rather. But this whole idea that Anakin is seeing someone who is gaining a dark power, which might initially seem like helping someone to better their loved ones and better their life, suddenly sees that it hurts their loved ones and can be detrimental. And that's the spiritual journey where he's seeing inside of himself, where whether he passes the test or not. I'm still unsure what they're suggesting, whether he passes or not, but presumably, given the events of the later Star Wars, he doesn't.
I mean, I mean, if that particular scene in episode 3 is anything to go by, then
Too many
yeah.
of them, Master Anakin.
What are we going to do? Hey, check out my hand, kid! Bzz. It's like, yeah, they did not pass. In the words of like another person who described that scene, they did not pass the vibe check. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like that. I don't know. I always felt that scene was a bit on the nose, where it was like, oh, this guy's got a robot, or this guy's got like a horrible hand. And it's like, oh, I've got a weird hand as well. It's like, but that's, I don't know. Like, I see what they're going at, but it just seemed a bit too on the note. But then again, I suppose if this is directed more at kids, then
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah, like I can
it's not
understand.
exactly Breaking Bad,
Yeah,
but it is for children. But I do understand what you're saying.
yeah,
The thing I think is a little bit clumsy is equating his robot hand
yeah,
to the dark hand, because the robot hand doesn't really aid him
yeah.
more away than the Force does. So I don't fully understand the analogy there, but they're making a big deal about his robot hand. The whole scene where they're meeting this Aboriginal group who have been apprehended and being experimented on by the Separatists.
And I mean, it's an interesting, like, I can see what they were going for, because I think the whole side bit with Anakin and Obi-Wan is something that the prequels unfortunately didn't give us much of. That, of course, being their relationship. Because, you know, like at the end of the Revenge of the Sith, you see Obi-Wan yelling at a burning Anakin, which again is a weird scene, saying, you know, you were my brother, I loved you. And, you know, it's like, it's a shame we never got to see that in the films. Whereas, although it's kind of limited, because in the first part of the Clone War, or first part of Clone Wars, it's basically Obi-Wan chastising Anakin throughout the entire thing, saying, don't do that, don't do that, I told you not to do that. But then in part two, they become like a lot more friendly. They become more like
Hmm.
friends, and
Yeah, they're always like hand in hand against the threat, and there's a weird bug eating scene
yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking there.
where like they're like two, like it's like one of those like shows with like two cops who can't get along but have to be partners kind of thing.
Yeah, you're a rogue, you're a menace, but you're the best damn Jedi we've got.
Pretty much. I want your
Yeah,
badge and your lightsaber.
here, you can take the lightsaber. But yeah, I mean, it's good in that way. And one of the other things, like, I really like about this series as well is, although it's so short, I do love the ambition of it. It has to kind of fill in the gaps that the prequels, like, failed to do. So, for example, we had that scene, as we were saying, with developing their relationship, and I think they even say that behind the scenes that that was one of the intentions. But one of the other cool things we see is the rise and subsequent domination of the Separatist army.
Hmm.
Like, there's a whole montage scene of that where they're just like marching through settlements and yeah, just basically wrecking stuff. You even get like I think a brief cameo on Kashyyyk, which is like the Wookiee planet. I still do not like. I love the designs and things, but I don't know why the Wookiees always rubbed me the wrong way whenever I saw the design
Was
of
that
them.
part two? I guess
Yeah,
I didn't notice that scene.
it's basically where they do like a really good job of it. It's like a montage where it's well initially it's like this Wookiee who I don't know if it's supposed to be Chewbacca. I'm not trying to say all Wookiees are Chewbacca, but
You talking about the young teenage one, or are you talking about the
no,
older
the
one?
older one. No, the older one.
Right. Yeah.
Because he would have been, yeah, he would have been older at the time. But yeah, he
Yeah.
pulls. What I love is he like pulls off this massive like blanket of vines, and it's just a tank sitting behind it, and then they all start rolling, and it's like, how did nobody notice this before? I mean, it's a cool scene again.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, again, it's like the rule of cool. Like there was probably just a droid at the side, just holding like a leaf in front of its head. You know, it's is that kind of logic. But yeah, you just
Beep
see it
beep.
like
I'm a leaf. Beep beep. I'm a leaf.
but you just see some like really haunting scenes for like this, like the context of this show. Like you see the droids marching through this. I can't remember what they're called, but you know the blue aliens with the long like snouts. They've got like the big black eyes, like the
The
big beady.
one that sings the jets. The one that
Yeah,
sings.
yeah, the ones that look like
What's his
beanie
name? It's
babies.
like it sounds like it's not Greedo, but it sounds almost like Greedo.
Oh no, it's not them. No, that's Rhodians, but I know what you mean.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's like blue, kind of puffy. They basically look like marketable toys, essentially. If you sold a toy
Okay.
of it, war-stricken alien, just put it in your child's Christmas stocking. But yeah, you see like the reflection in their eyes of like the separatist army marching through like the burnt down city. You see like other like native species like just getting trampled by them, and then there's like one scene where you see the clone or like a clone army that have just been surrounded and taken prisoner. And it's like it is interesting that they show that side of the war. Like they don't just see it as oh the Republic's like winning from strength to strength. And considering like the time limit they had for this, obviously the 2008 Clone Wars does it like develops it a lot better. But they had like what 7 seasons to do that in, and like for it's about an hour, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's part
they
yeah.
this whole part two was just over an hour,
Hmm.
and so they have very limited time to convey what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a great job considering like they've only got an hour, and they're just like, quick,
Mhm.
throw in this scene, and then of course it goes into quite possibly one of my most favourite meme-worthy scenes where Yoda's sitting like meditating, and then he opens his eyes as if, something's wrong, and then he opens his blinds, and there's just like a whole army of separatist robots.
It is just so ridiculous that no one raised the alarm.
Yeah,
Entire thing going until he opens the blinds. I also took huge issue with this.
Oh,
And
I thought I was hilarious. I could
oh,
not
it's
stop
very
laughing.
funny. Just while we're on the topic of
Yeah.
memeable, things, I feel remiss that we did not last time mention Count Dooku's Indeed.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
because if, for those of you unaware, essentially Count Dooku arrives on an alien planet. This is where he meets Asajj Ventress for the first
Yeah.
time. he gets off his spaceship, and this like I think it's a female alien
Yeah,
and starts speaking in their alien language, and he listens for a little while, and then she replies, "Indeed." And it's so I don't maybe other people don't find it as funny as I did, but every time it just cracks me up that just this like deadpan indeed to like
yeah.
where we clearly didn't understand what was happening before.
I loved it. That scene never failed to make me laugh when I watched it when I was younger. I was just like, I mean, even today, it's so relatable. Just having this like alien language spoken to you, it's just like, indeed. That's it. Like there's no development for it. It's just like he says that and then he moves on. But yeah, like yeah, I don't know what's worse though. Like the fact that Yoda doesn't notice until he opens his blinds, or the fact that Mace Windu comes in 2 seconds later and says the city is under attack, and it's like, well, no shit. Have you seen outside? Like a
It's like reporting the weather.
yeah, exactly. It's like an utter massacre. It's like, oh, why would you? But that is just such a cool action piece. And then, of course, it's kind of subdivided. You've got one side of it where you're focusing on just basically the Republic trying to repel the Separatists. And you even get a very cool scene, which I absolutely adore this character. So it's a clone trooper or an ARC trooper called Captain Fordo, who he dresses in like the white armor, but he's got like red,
Accents.
yeah, and he apparently that's the same character. So like he's in the first one where he blows up a cannon with his teammates, and then he nearly kills off one of the other main antagonists. He fights Grievous, and then in this one it's like he's getting overrun by droids, and he like single-handedly like takes out half of them before he orders them to fall back, and it's like Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
he's just like he like stands there and he's just like every direction, just nailing down people, and he makes it out, which is just like
Yeah.
so. It's something where like you would just be seeing these faceless characters being
Mhm.
overwhelmed and destroyed, and you wouldn't think anything of it. But they make time to show that this commander of these troopers is himself a badass, that he holds his own against these droids,
Mhm.
sending wave after wave of men. That they're trained and that they can actually make an impact.
And there is quite a cool scene, I have to admit, where, like, later on, the Jedi end up saving him and, basically getting him out of Dodge. No, they basically save him, and there's a scene where the clone troopers ask him, he says, like, oh, push up on the right, and they say, well, sir, what about the left? And they're like, oh, the Jedi have the left. And then you cut to, like, Yoda and Mace Windu just absolutely destroying them. Mace Windu as well returning to, like, punch things. Like, at one point he just punches a super battle droid. It is amazing.
There
It's...
must there must be some sort of like Jedi kung fu.
No.
Um,
No, it's his fist.
there must be a term for it that I just don't know the name
What,
of
force
some
punch?
like comedic kung fu. But like how like Superman is supposed to know like five Kryptonian styles of like hand to hand combat.
Oh, yeah.
Is like a Jedi equivalent as well.
Oh, there probably will be, but it's awesome. I think that is definitely that is one of the highlights for sure. That scene when they're trying to repel the army, but I think that side of the story comes into its element when we return back to basically to one of the survivors of Grievous's attack, Shakti, and she's accompanied by two other Jedi who try to get the Chancellor Palpatine, out of his office. And that is one of my favourite scenes as well, where it's
He's so
seen.
confident.
Yeah,
The Chancellor is so like stubborn, which when we spoilers for Star Wars.
yeah.
Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord in hiding, but from the way that this show depicts it, it suggests that lots of the Separatist force aren't aware that Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord.
Mhm.
Grievous treats Palpatine in a way that suggests that he doesn't like this Chancellor and that he'd rather kill him. So I think the suggestion is that he also is not aware.
I think he's not aware. In fact, no, he isn't aware because there's actually a line of dialogue at the very end that highlights
Because
that.
your master wouldn't want you to harm me.
Yeah, no, it's I think Grievous says that. He says you're lucky. My master wants you alive or something. Because I think he would have ended him or tried to at least.
I think so too.
Yeah. It's just like, oh well, I
It would
tried.
have been very awkward if the Separatists killed their leader.
Yeah, that would have been a big oopsie daisy. Or what is
I
it?
mean
You?
that,
Yeah.
I mean that was Dooku's plan to. Why am I blanking on the Emperor's name?
Sidious.
Sidious, Darth Sidious,
Yeah.
yeah. That the Dooku's plan was to defeat Darth Sidious eventually, which
Mm.
is kind of the Sith kind of model that you defeat your master. I think it's almost like expected, and so he's always like bringing in a new Padawan who would eventually then succeed him.
It's a bad business model.
It is in a way, and
Uh,
it's a bizarre one because essentially the whole idea is there can only really be like two Sith at a time, because of all the infighting. But there can be like many Jedi, and like regardless of how strong the Sith are,
hmm.
you feel that just puts them at such a disadvantage that there's no way they should be winning.
Yeah, something, something. It's the Force. Yeah, that's the way they explain it in the film. So yeah, I'm sure that's the reason. Like going back to like the kind of that scene where Sidious nearly gets, or sorry, Palpatine nearly gets ground up into mush. There is like one really amazing moment where Shakti comes into the office, and as you say, it's like Palpatine is very confident. He's like sitting there with a cup of tea, and he's just, so overconfident that the fighting's too far away. And then she hears like the sound of Grievous walking on the roof,
Yeah.
and she becomes terrified. I think that was a really nice touch. And she says like, come
Well, because
back.
she fought him already,
Yeah.
and she was familiar with his like sneaking around,
Hmm.
and just like hearing in this almost the scaffolding as
Yeah.
it was in the first part, and how she got easily defeated by him. So she's terrified of Grievous, and she just wants to get Palpatine out into sort of the safety bunker, but
But
he's so reluctant to leave his position. I think largely because he wants to be captured here.
yeah.
I think that's his whole plan, that he's intending to be captured.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, I sure hope no droid generals try to capture me just now. I said. I mean, it does lead to some awesome action scenes afterwards, though. And I think it is something, like, this is something we were saying before, like last week, where Genndy really takes advantage of basically the characters and the scenery when it comes to
Mhm.
these action. Like, they basically pull away the Chancellor, not before he gives him, like, an earful. He's like, now see here, I'm the Supreme Chancellor, and they pull him away and they have to like drag him out, and
It's the use of like we were hearing Grievous walking above them. Everyone was like quiet and scared, and then all of a sudden it goes quiet, and the Chancellor goes, "See, there's nothing to worry about." And then you see Grievous's head
oh,
like
that's amazing. Yeah,
slope down, which was kind of, like comedic in its manner, but like at the same time very frightening. And just blasts through the glass, knocking the Chancellor to the floor, and then there's this confrontation between the two of them, and the Chancellor maintains trying to like gold the bad guy, which is just so short-sighted. I don't know what like he was going for there. Like it was completely ridiculous.
I just love how composed he is. Like, I know obviously it's his plan, but I do love how composed he seems. He's just like, now see here, young Jim. I'll give you a bop. It's like, he's just very like, how dare you, how dare you ruin my perfectly good cup of tea. It's not something he says, but it's like that kind of attitude of, I'm the Supreme Chancellor and all of this, and Grievous is just having none of it.
It
And
is
he,
Mr. Burns energy, I feel.
pretty much, yeah. He actually runs like Mr. Burns as well, if you noticed that at the very end. Like when they're
I
running into the
didn't really,
bunker.
but see, a lot of the time he was being carried.
No, like look at the very end. It's like he's running with his hands out, like Mr. Burns.
Oh.
It's really funny. But yeah, like I do like after they escape, there is another Jedi who I don't know what the alien species is, but I have seen it before. It's basically like a slug person, isn't it?
The brown one that like has
Yeah.
a pod-shaped head, yeah.
Mhm.
And I really liked that character. They don't have any lines, I don't believe, at
No.
least in our language. But he's really badass. And then there's the kind of furry one who makes like 2D noises.
Yeah.
They're
Pingu.
pretty good fighters. They kind of hold their own for a large part of it.
No.
And there's a real fight scene with because you've got Grievous and then you have his like armed guard kind of thing who are like droids but like have these like staffs that are like taser staffs that can also like fight against like lightsabers. And so you've got like hand-to-hand combat fights with these droids in a train station with all these like various like high-speed trains like flying by, and you're like jumping from like as the train's about to come, you jump off the tracks and that kind of stuff. And the whole fight choreography is really interesting. The use of the scenery is fantastic, and this fight is going on, and then they manage to get away from the majority of these droids, but Grievous is still fighting as well, and Grievous out to sort of capture them when Chakti ties his cape to a train which flies away, which remind me of the Incredibles of no capes.
Yeah. Exactly. It is. It's just so well done, though, that whole fight. I mean, see, even before that, like, one of the highlights is, as I was saying with that, like, slug alien, it's when they say that he's got, like, four throats or something like that. Whether or not that's been established, I don't know, but, like, because of that, he uses, like, some kind of force shout or something. So it's like he sends out, like, this projectile force to stop Grievous. Like the first time, like the second time this alien uses that force shout or whatever it is, he destroys all the things behind him, but Grievous adapts into... It's like, you know, one of those memes where people like tuck their arms and their legs into the one t-shirt? That's what it looks like, where he just becomes like this, like, I don't even know what you would call that. Like a battery? A bin? Like, because he tucks his head in like a turtle and he just starts like running to or like moving towards them. And I mean, even before that, you've got the guy who decided to fire a bloody RPG, or not an RPG, but a rocket launcher in a lift.
Yeah, and then like smokes out the lift. That was a very good choice. Yeah, this is prior to the train station scene where like he's like running alongside the building.
I just love how Cammy is when he does that. He sees Grievous and he's like, not again. He just fires it. It's like, what the hell?
He's like casually loads the rocket launcher and just fires at the guy next to him.
But I mean, that, like, eventually, of course, leads on to, like, this is the thing. When I was younger, like, I was more, as I said, I was more interested in that than the Anakin story. So it was like, after they managed to, as you said, tie the cape onto the train and throw him away to halfway across the city. Like, I think it cuts back to the Anakin stuff, and I remember just being like, oh no, like, go back to the Grievous stuff. It's like, no, when are we gonna get to the fireworks factory? You know, that kind of thing. It's like...
How many Simpsons memes are we gonna fit into this episode?
Clearly not enough. Really not enough. But yeah, eventually they get to, I think, like basically the underground, isn't it? Where they're like in this tunnel and Shakti decides to sacrifice herself to General Grievous's Magna Guards or bodyguards and fight them off, and I think she manages to hold her own actually, which is really cool. That's a cool fight. But then of course the plot twist being that Grievous is waiting for them, for the Chancellor and the other two in the bunker.
In the bunker.
How he got in that, I don't know. Unless...
It's you know what it's like. It's like in the Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
Where like they get to like Yzma's secret lair, and then they're like, "How did you get here first?" And then she turns to Kronk and says, "How did we?"
How did it? I don't know. This math makes no sense.
How could you possibly have gotten to the bunker first?
Like, even if he did, like, where did that train go at like high speeds? Like,
Well,
okay.
you would think that he cut his cape.
Oh yeah.
With his lightsaber, like pretty immediately.
Yeah.
But regardless, there's no way he should have been able to get down there prior to them, because they. And I took issue with this later as well, because they took like a high speed like train thingy down into the bunker, and then Chucky runs down there later. And I'm like, well, if she's able to run down there, what was the point of the train?
See, there's not a lot of security in that bunker either, because you would expect like there to be someone there waiting for them other than Grievous. It's a worse reception.
It's like budgetary issues.
Yeah, probably. It's like the Republic are funneling. Well, no, that makes sense. They probably were. For the Empire.
I was more meaning the show's creators, but yes,
sorry.
World, there may have also been budgetary concerns.
All right, yeah, that too. No, I thought you were actually meaning like Palpatine was just like, no, we don't need security in the secret bunker. It's like, wait, what? No, I think you do. Because otherwise shit like this happens. Yeah, I think that's actually the very first time we realise that Grievous has 4 arms. Because in the finale for the first part, you see he uses his feet, he uses his hands, he just uses everything really to like fight off people. But in this, it's like a really well done scene where he's got the two in kind of like they're like in a stalemate where they think, oh, we've got the upper hand. You know, 2 Jedi against this one guy, and then all of a sudden you hear the click of his wrists, and he just like reaches down with his other arms to get the the lightsabers, and just like with a flash, that's it, they're gone. And it's just it's so insane. It is like really well done, because you don't even see him cut into them really, which you wouldn't really want to, but it's...
No, again, this being a children's
yeah,
program,
of course.
get too
Damn it.
too dark into that. But
Yeah.
saying that, and again, we're jumping back and forward a little bit, but the scene where Grievous enters into the room where Palpatine was, and there's a bunch of clone troopers in there who start firing at Grievous, and Grievous sort of jumps over the shots. And where I was saying earlier about how the troopers are a genuine like threat, and they like Grievous was frightened of them, Grievous very easily jumps over them here, and just you see him through them, like you see like actual lightsaber like slashes through them, and like at one point you see like the helmet shatter and you can see their jaw, and which is pretty violent for a children's show generally. And I think the reason they're able to get away with that is a similar reason to why they can destroy droids, because they're faceless.
Yeah.
They're able to act as cannon fodder, that they can be killed in slightly more gruesome ways than people whose faces we can see.
Yeah, I can imagine how that like meeting went. It's like, Disney, why are you putting a helmet on me? Disney, why is my face covered? Disney, why do you have a lightsaber?
At the time, it wasn't Disney. It was.
Well, yeah. George, why are you putting a helmet on me? Exactly. Cartoon Network, why are you igniting your lightsaber? What's going on? It's like they have mice and men.
Yeah, I was about to say. Tell me about the Womp Rats, George.
And that's it.
Well, that works well, George Lucas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm patting myself on the shoulder for that one. Good job. Good job, Satsu, good job. And of course then that leads to the relatively final scene where, of course, Mace Windu manages to like just get there, crush General Grievous's chest using the Force. And for the longest time, everyone was like, oh, so that's why Grievous coughs, up until the new CGI series, where it turns out he just did that all along, and it's like, oh, there's like no cool reason behind it anymore. He just like comes in and he nearly gets him.
Which is a really kind of gruesome scene. Which, because you see like Force choking in the original series. Darth Vader Force chokes his underling, and it's a very kind of like evil thing, using the Force to crush someone's body part, whether it's neck or whatever. Yeah. Seeing Mace Windu do that to his chest, you were like, oh my god, like Jedi do that?
Well, Mace Windu can do that, I think.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Mace Windu can do whatever he wants.
I mean, he literally punches droids in this, and then he flies another droid through the air. I think he can do whatever he wants. He is definitely OP in this one.
Speaking of OP a little bit, in the Defense of Coruscant, you do see a bit of Master Yoda and his Jedi Force abilities, where he initially lifts up probably about 50 of those like roly-poly. I can't remember their names. He lifts them up like a wall for the enemy ships to fly into, so he's both destroying them and the ships that are flying around, which is cool. And then like these like giant ships start coming in, and he initially pushes like tanks back into one of the ships, then starts sliding that large carrier ship back into another ship, and then just the Force for two that are in the air just to collide with each other. So he's like demonstrating Force powers that I don't think we've seen ever to that extent. I think that's probably biggest thing we've seen someone move with the Force in any Star Wars property.
I think you're right, because up until I suppose up until like Force Unleashed, like the video game spin-off, like up until then I think it was very limited about what they could do. Like they could lift like fighter starships from
we saw Luke lift his X-wing
but technically
up.
That was Yoda.
Was it?
Yeah, it was like, remember he tried to do it, but then he failed, and then Yoda just does it, and he's like, ta-da! And it's like,
I guess that's a Mandela effect for me, or rather, it's not Mandela effect. It might just be me remembering.
Unless he does it in another scene, like Yoda does it, and then is a dick and puts it back in again, and says, "Now you." It's like, I don't wanna.
Insurance is going to pay for swamp damage twice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, speaking of ships, like, very briefly, did you ever notice that? Like, there's another kind of scene in the Defense of Coruscant where they show you, like, a quick space battle, and the amount of ships there is ridiculous. ridiculous. Like, you go in and it's kind of hard to see, like, what's a star and what's a spaceship, because it's like you see them like going into the atmosphere of the planet, and it's like you see all these like white dots, and you're like, oh, there's a lot of stars here, and then it kind of zooms in, and it's like, why is that star a triangle? Why has that one got droids coming out of it? And you're like, oh my god, these are all ships. And again, it's going back to what I said last week about like part one, that it's just the scale of it, isn't it? Like, it's
It is a huge scale, and that the whole scene is very interesting, where you're seeing troopers like flying through space, like they're not like in a ship. They jump off of their ship to land onto the deck of another ship. In the later, more recent movies, there's in the I think it's just the most recent movie where we see them like riding stuff up the outside of a ship in space, which I didn't fully get, but that's another discussion.
Oh yeah.
But you're seeing them on the outside of a ship, which I don't think you'd seen before. You one
No,
in space, like on the outside of a ship. So it was a very interesting scene where they board an enemy ship, they get into it. The commander with like the inverted horns, well, not maybe not inverted, but like the horns facing downwards, gets in there, captures the ship, and then like has them fire the guns of that ship into like another enemy ship. So you're like they're firing on their own ship kind of thing. And so you are getting a very kind of unique kind of perspective of what else is happening in this world. So what we were saying in the previous episode of Bruce part, we were seeing like what's happening across the universe for various different Jedi and clone troopers and that kind of stuff. We got limited aspects of that this time, but we do see this particular character and like what he gets up to, which I feel like I would love to see more of him in other properties. I'm not clear what happens to him, but he's very interesting. And we also see him in the Jedi Council, where we see like the likes of Kit Fisto, and I think this is the first time we hear Kit Fisto talk, where he just kind of like this very kind of like cool dude, like praising Anakin as to like how great a fighter Anakin is. And then we see the like Dr. Seuss snake creature Jedi, whose name you mentioned previously to me,
oh no,
but
no, I sent
can't
you
remember.
the Wikipedia article saying he survived Order 66, and I was
That's right.
just,
He like hid away and did nothing.
yeah, I was like just as surprised as you were when I saw that. I was like, I wonder what happened to him, and then it was like, oh my god, he
He
survived.
creeped me out to no end when
That
I was
was
younger.
weird.
He had
Yeah.
his fingers like curled, but like they could like uncurl when he wanted them to, so they could be like super long, but just like resting, they would just be like curled in, and it was very like the Grinch, very like
Yeah, they had a lot of weirdos in the council. No wonder it fell apart. That's all I'm saying. No wonder it fell
the
apart.
Republic was doomed.
The Republic was doomed when you had a literal snake on the council and two Yodas.
Oh yeah, there's like female Yoda or something, isn't there?
Yeah, Yaddle, I think her name is. It's like, okay, fair enough. Which is
Um,
something you would never know from watching the films. Nobody says what's up Yaddle or anything as a Wikipedia task. Yeah, that leads from, as we said, from the space battle and Mace Windu, crushing a poor guy's chest in, to Anakin and Obi-Wan, of course, finishing their mission from stopping the Techno Union from, basically from exploiting the natives, and they get the message that Coruscant is under attack, and you get like the music that's starting to build up, where Anakin starts saying battle stations, and then it leads into like the very beginning of
third
Revenge
movie.
of the third movie, Revenge of the Sith, yeah, where it just leads perfectly into that, and then it just ends, and I think it's a very good ending.
That is done fantastically well. I think the way that they leave it as just like before what is about to happen in the third movie. As I say, this series had been going on for a couple of years in the interim period between the second and third movie, and so this is just prior to the third movie coming out. And so for those who were watching along as the series came out and then went to the cinema, they were able to see that what they just saw in this cartoon series is now happening in this live action movie. And it really kind of makes it, or rather elevates the cartoon series to something that's worth watching when you're able to say that it has genuine impact on the events of the movie.
Yeah.
And why I was a little bit upset when it was deemed no longer canon, because it did feel like such a good companion piece to the prequel movies. Because whatever you think about the prequel movies, I think that this series aided in making them better. A lot of my interest in the prequel movies stems because of the lore that was created through this series, no longer canon.
There seems to be a lot of like properties from Star Wars, unfortunately, that like while cool, like especially this series, I'm totally with you there. I feel as if the Clone War, or not the Clone Wars, but the 2003 series is definitely something that even at the time the prequels needed to supplement it, because like you can complain about how bad the Clone Wars, and I don't mean you specifically, Greenshield, sorry. You can like complain about the like how bad Attack of the Clones is or whatever, but I mean on the plus side we got this series out of it. I wouldn't say it was like a win-win situation, but it's definitely something good that came out of that kind of era of Star Wars. And I mean, if anything, it's just a nostalgic action piece, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is purely just something that I enjoyed as a child, and I've rewatched, and I still enjoy it today. It's a fantastic little companion piece. It's fantastic content from the Star Wars universe, and I would probably say that along with the Mandalorian series that came out on Disney Plus over the last couple of years, these two properties are probably my favorite Star Wars content, including the movies. I rate these this show and as well as the Mandalorian, which I'm sure we will talk about it on another
Oh yeah.
episode of Satsunami. I would say these two properties are the most interesting that this franchise has created in a long time, and it is. I said it already, but it's a shame that it's no longer considered to be of importance to the series.
I suppose it's the fans that keep it alive.
Yeah, and it's the fans who can deem whether or not it's canon to them, and it remains canon to me. I decide that Grievous coughs like that because Mace Windu broke his chest, that Anakin went through his spiritual journey, and that the troopers are acting the way they do with through evidence of this series. The characters are cemented through this show as opposed through other properties.
So just as a kind of closing thought, would you recommend this show?
If it's not apparent already, I love this show and I would recommend it. I'm so pleased that it's now on Disney Plus. It was on YouTube, so you could previously watch it on there. And if you don't have Disney Plus, you can still probably find it on YouTube if you look up Star Wars Clone Wars 2003. We split into part one and part two as we previously watched it. But if you do have Disney Plus, I watched it today, and I think the quality is better on there. I think the animation quality has been maybe had a revamp. Maybe they did a remaster of it. So I would recommend if you can to watch it on there. I would say it's a fantastic piece if whether you like Star Wars or if you're a bit middling on it, I think it's still worth a watch.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a series. If you haven't already watched it, go watch it. It is definitely worth it. The only thing I would say as a closing thought, don't let Qui-Gon Jinn's nose put you off the series.
We didn't talk about that. That was such a random scene where I took issue with that watching again today, where I don't know what point that is supposed to have taken place, because as far as we've seen,
Yeah.
Qui-Gon can interact that much more in the Phantom Menace.
So sorry, do you want to explain that scene just quickly?
So there's a scene very early on in part two where it's just like 60 seconds where it's just Qui-Gon Jinn and a very young Anakin from the Phantom Menace in like a swampy forest area. Then there's a tree, and presumably it's the same tree that we see in, I don't know if it's the fifth or the sixth movie or one of the original trilogy.
The fifth, yeah.
Luke Skywalker goes in and fights Darth Vader, which then turns out to be himself, and he has this whole like spiritual journey. So presumably it's the same sort of spirit tree that he's interacting with, and he's very scared to go in, and Qui-Gon says that he's going to have to do this, and he sends him into the tree to go do whatever. And that's it. That's all we see. And I remember being very confused when I was younger about this, and I was like wanting to see what happens if we're going to see more, but that never came up again. And so unclear what the reasoning for that scene was and where it takes place in the actual franchise. Because I mean, were you able to interpret it?
I'm assuming it's either a dream or a force vision. I mean, that's the way they usually explain it away, isn't it? It's just a vision or something.
But they had no grounds to show that. Like, it didn't like show Anakin waking up from it. It didn't. It did show Yoda waking up from it, though.
Do you know what? Do you know what I think it was? I think it was probably because they already drew the scene And then, although they thought it made no sense, they were like, listen, we spent so much time drawing Qui-Gon Jinn's nose and just face that maybe
Poor,
we should.
poor Liam Neeson.
Like, I know, like, I'm kind of going on about this, but honestly, the first time I saw that scene, I was just like, whoa! It's like, what is going on here in the animation department? Because, I mean, because overall the animation's great. Like, it's so fun, it's so fluid, and it's, like,
I,
very stylized, but just
I
that
would be
one
in,
scene
I,
is.
I would actually be interested in knowing what the frames they created for the show was, because I was actually looking a little bit harder at the animation today. There were like sections where a usual show wouldn't be showing the degradation, like a helmet is stepped on, the shattering pieces sort of flying out, and there's lots of little kind of scenes where like you see like connection of like a punch or something like that, and so it's extra frames that were inserted. And so I'm curious how many frames there were per second in the shots for this show, because it seems like they must have put a lot of time into it if they're doing extra, because there's like an industry standard which is not that high. If you look at sort of like anime, generally anime has a lot higher frame rate than Western cartoons does, which is not a criticism of Western cartoons. It's just a different style approach. But it feels like this particular show had more frame rates than the average. I feel. I've said what I need to say on the series. If you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you check it out.
Yeah, go check it out. If you haven't, there's always YouTube.
If you're looking for it on Disney Plus, it's Star Wars Vintage: colon Clone Wars 2D micro series. It's quite a mouthful because I guess they want to distinguish it from the canon, the Clone Wars. It is there. If you just search Clone Wars in there, and you'll scroll down a little bit because they've kind of like hidden it a little bit.
I was
But
going to
you'll
say, is the link something like https:// Star Wars the Clone Wars at disneyplus.co.uk.
Yeah, I try to share it with you actually. So I thought like, oh, just like link him to the app that he has, but
Yeah.
it you a hyperlink, and I was like, oh, no one's gonna click on this.
I hate when that happens. I remember, like, sorry, just very briefly, I remember that happened in school. Yeah, when, like, the internet was kind of just coming into its element, and you would get teachers who would just put those hyperlinks in, but they wouldn't put the, like, main hyperlink of the website. They would put, like, the full one of the page they were on. So you would get, like, the first bit, and then you would just get gibberish after it. Like, some kind of code. It's like, what am I
You have to
supposed?
solve it.
But that's the thing, though. They wouldn't send it to you on a computer. They would print it out and give you a piece of paper and go, "There you go. There's the website." It's like, this is a nightmare. This is just not a nightmare. But yeah, those were the days in 2003 onwards, which is probably another Chatsunami we can discuss. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the second part today. Much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Where can these amazing listeners of the Republic hear you? Not hear you, but find you online.
I currently have two platforms I'm most on. You can find me on Twitter at Greenshield95, and you can also find me on Twitch, where I am streaming not too frequently, but I'm trying to get a bit more into that. Also at Greenshield95. I have a few followers in there, and I'm always happy to have more people popping into my streams.
If you haven't checked out Greenshield95, then please go ahead and do it, because he does some awesome streams. And yeah, please do it. Do it now. I was trying to think of a Star Wars quote there. Do it now.
Do it now.
Do it now, Trooper. If you want to see more of my stuff, you can see me on, and yep, you've probably got the script right in front of you. You can see me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and of course Twitch under the name Satsunami42. If you would like to check out a live Chatsunami episode, then you can do every Wednesday at 8 p.m. GMT. You can also catch brand new episodes on Fridays as well that are pre-recorded. And yeah, if you want to check out more Chatsunami episodes, yeah, you can see us on Anchor, Spotify, and all good podcast distributors. So please feel free to check that out. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Thank you again, Andrew, for joining me with this.
Indeed.
Indeed. As always, guys, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated. Bye, guys.